Good morning, TLDC land, and happy Thanksgiving a day early. You're probably all out there cooking, is what we're doing too. Although my husband's cooking. Don't tell anybody. He's doing all the cooking.
I'm so jealous.
He gets to do all of his favorites that way. So it's all good.
Nice.
So we're here today to talk about optimizing your learning management system for reporting and analytics. So we've talked about like the process to kind of get the project started, like some of the project planning that we do to get things rolling and rolled out. The thing that you will always find with learning management system is even once it's out there, it's going to continue to need maintenance and help. And that really comes from the requests that you're going to get from your stakeholders a lot of times, as far as what they need for reporting, the integrations that need to be added in, and things like that. So I heard from Lisa that she just inherited an LMS.
I did. It is the fear of my existence right now. I was sort of working with this LMS, right, as part of my job as an instructional designer for my company, and had a lot of responsibility, but all the stuff that we're talking about, and actually the bane of my existence has been reporting in my current system. But now API and workflows and all of that, I'm so excited to talk to you about that, Toddi, and like learn a little bit more.
A little more experience, although I have to say, there's lots of different ways to handle these things too, and you're always going to want to get your IT team involved pretty heavily.
There's no IT team.
Oh,
So
no.
I work for a small. I know I joke all the time about my corporate experience, and you see me talk about that in presentations. And that was 25 plus years of experience, but now I'm working with a small nonprofit. We're 32 people. We are each our own IT. Like everything in front of me that I'm working with, like I'm responsible for it, the software, the hardware, the whole enchilada. So yeah, this is on me.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, and the lucky part is that you can actually go in and test these things. So you can, set up test cases and do the API call, see if you can pull in the data. Might be a little more difficult, but there's a number of folks out here who actually do some pretty customized things as well. So, if you want to add into the chat that, that's something that, you might be interested in helping with.
Maybe. Hopefully my boss will still be here next week.
Yeah.
Or next month or next year. And I'm sure she will be. She's amazing. We're just doing totally different jobs.
Crazy.
But she's actually done the API work already. So
nice.
It's great to learn in tandem, but it's also good to know there's more out in that community. And thanks to you with the tag you're it, because that is exactly how it's been feeling this last week.
Yeah.
I get off this call and go into another call about the system, so it's pretty fun.
Ooh.
I know, right? Like I said, it's all whoosh.
You're taking a deep dive.
And no choice.
It's kind of been my existence for probably, I'd say, at least half of my last 12 years. It's going the LMS. In a fairly, I guess, a medium-sized company, I owned the LMS for about 5,000 people in a domestic region. Prior to that, I had owned the LMS for about 15,000 people internationally. And then most recently, I actually owned the LMS for a fairly large size organization, but we also had external users as well. So people who were contractors. So we were having to look at many different use cases of how someone was going to get into the system, what their logins would look like, what their SSO, those are part of your integration, what all of that like. So I threw together a slide deck just to kind of help guide us. The reason why you want to optimize your LMS. I mean, we talked a little bit about this already. You can, number one, you're going to be able to level set your data in a better way, which enhances decision making. It also gives you better insight into like your total reporting, as long as you know that you have everybody accurately into your systems. When you're doing the types of things that you would do for an audit report or a safety compliance report, you want to be sure that you have everybody in the system with their current roles, with their current supervisor, and some LMSs will give you a management field, but not a supervisor field. A lot of things like that can be made much better actually by optimizing an
Yes.
LMS, doing some tweaks, which is
That
really
is
cool.
I would say that's one of the largest things that I've run into just in managing them, right? Being more on
Yep.
the front end of that is when you're looking at reporting and you don't know this ahead of time, it's sort of like you're almost like a dog chasing your tail, right? I need this field, I need this field. And then often you're scratching your head as to why a certain field would be missing. Like for
Oh yeah.
us, there's no company field. Now we're an association. All of
Yeah.
our members are from different companies. We need to be able to parse
Oh
our data
wow.
that way, but there's nowhere to put it. So like our
Mm-mm.
workaround, right, is download the data and then start playing in Excel to get the data out of the email field when people share their email.
Right.
All of this sounds really silly, I'm sure, to all of you. But it's these things, like to Toddi's point, like it's the things you need to know ahead as much as possible because, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm imagining that we're going to have a really good time with my system now that we're going into this new AMS because now we need to build things in again. We need to change
Right.
our database. You
Yeah.
never want to do that twice.
No, but you sometimes have to add to it. So, and it's interesting because I see Q is up. Hi, Q. He's he's making his puns
Yeah,
about
I love it.
um, the thing is some of the LMS systems that you'll use will actually have pre-configured fields. I've dealt with that before,
Mhm.
where they'll recommend a structure when you bring your data in, but that structure may not be exactly what works for you. So then that puts you in that position where you're having to go in and create custom fields and then go through and do like I did a weekly update. I did an FTP upload. The fields would run in the back end. It'd run at 3 a.m. I'd get the validation
Mhm.
that what we were doing from the API calls had run. It had populated the fields. I would get a report. I would look for errors
Nice.
and that kind of thing. But in the end, it helped us because we were able to allocate our folks to their supervisors, which also helped us do things like create notifications for late training,
Yep.
overdue, that kind of
And
stuff.
that's the dream, right? Even for us, when we look at these, since they're external organizations, we want to help them manage the people they're putting through our courses.
Right.
So
Right.
we really need something like that. It's like that. Actually, it's like that on steroids.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, there are LMSs out there that seamlessly integrate. Workday is kind of a tough call these days with respect to HRISs, but
Yes.
um, many of the LMSs will now integrate with it pretty seamlessly. It's a matter of just making the connections. Other times, and then I've dealt with it exactly with Workday, but this has been before, things kind of move forward, where we actually had to do reporting out of the HRS and then do manual updates.
And that's literally what we do today. And we're more
Oh
limited.
boy.
And I don't know if anyone in the audience or anyone who watches the replay on this, but when you're, and this is a whole world I didn't understand, but HRIS, right, to corporate is like what AMS is to association management. And
Right,
association
right.
management is probably, please, anyone out there, don't take this as not me being judgy, but they're about 15 to 20 years behind from a tech perspective
Yeah,
in that sense. So finding an LMS that even integrates with an AMS, our choices were three. Three
yeah,
out of all of the ones out there would have worked with the AMS that we used to have, right?
right.
So that was our pool, and they were very it was a huge range of
Yeah,
old tech
yeah.
to new tech.
Yeah, and actually that is your limiting factor is what will easily integrate.
Yeah.
HRS meaning human resource information system and AMS
Yes.
being association meaning.
Association management
Yeah.
system, right?
And that's, it's essentially typically a great container for your data, but it's still never integrated into your
Yeah.
learning
To
system.
your
So
workday point, and something good for anyone watching this back who's involved in a corporate integration where you're looking at an HRIS system like Workday for me, frankly, and yes, we're going to go back a decade, but I have not heard better things since then from
yeah,
colleagues, right, who are still working in this area. And I really do hope I'm wrong there. But one of the biggest challenges for us with Workday was I think you and I might have talked about this at some point, the fact that Workday system proper, HRIS, and
hmm,
Workday performance manage, I'm sorry, that includes performance management and
right,
Workday learning and development, which looks like the same system, do not integrate. So like,
Right.
as you know, like here's your performance review, and this is what we want you to do, and you can't connect that to a training plan, which is
Yep.
pretty much the biggest function next to compliance that an HR team wants for
Right.
their, learning and management system. And when I learned that we were using that for learning and development, and that they didn't connect,
Right.
I think my head nearly popped off of my neck.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is just ignorant. This doesn't even make what year is it?
Yeah, and some of the LMS systems actually have the performance management systems built in. Cornerstone does that, so that's
That's awesome.
one of their upgrades. So that makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, there's all kinds of like different ways these are set up. There's nothing standard, which is
True.
kind of a crazy thing. Um, Really, what you're going to find yourself is looking at your data sets probably early on, and actually, let me just
Mhm.
move forward. That's part of what you
Point. That's what we're doing right now.
yeah, you'll be looking and surveying your data, to look for those gaps. Okay,
Yeah.
so where do I not have the information that I need here? Where do I need this to trigger a notification? Where do I need this to pit against performance management for the
Mhm.
performance systems? There's all kinds of things that you need to kind of do a survey of and determine, all right, do I have what I need? And I threw up here some key systems that typically get
Mhm.
integrated with the LMS. This is by no means an extensive list because you can have a lot of interesting things here. HRIS, and I just put examples in here. I just said Workday, your CRM, which most
Mhm.
companies use Salesforce. Um, I've actually seen some really robust processes built for performance management with Salesforce integrated.
Really?
Yeah, to be able to look at where cohorts and people are in terms of their training versus what their sales records look like.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, and not every company does that, but when you start to look at that data and look at it against each other, then you can see, okay, those folks that have gone through these sales trainings, internally have improved performance on their key metrics, which is, their sales wins.
I love
Uh,
that. Get
yeah.
ROI for causality. That's so nice.
It is, yeah, and actually, so Salesforce actually has some units as well where you can do things like sales enablement. You can parse out, content, to your perspectives and things like that. So that's,
Hmm.
there's all kinds of different ways that Salesforce gets used, and there's additional systems out there that are intentional for sales enablement. And you can integrate those as well. There's one called Seismic, which salespeople use to, deliver sales enablement systems. They schedule a lot of that. HubSpot will schedule out that kind of stuff. It's just fascinating to see how everything gets built together.
Sounds
And
like you should be consulting on this, Toddi.
I wish I could. I think I'm at a point where I've done it so much that I have a lot to say about it. It's just that the landscape changes constantly, so it's tough to keep
Sure.
up with. And that's actually one of the warnings, I'll throw out there is that the landscapes do change all the time. And you get new tool sets and new processes, and so it's you have to be on your toes. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
You get a lag for 6 months, and you look back at it, and you're like, okay, I've been running this job, and oh my gosh, now there's a new tool out there, or somebody's doing something
exactly.
different. Because I mean, there's all kinds of systems that can integrate. I've seen people that have like either their PLMs that will be integrated, so that somebody can dovetail in and see again, like status for things like where things are, the jobs that they've
Mhm.
done. But that's really, really intricate. Typically, you're going to look at like tool sets like reporting tools, like Power BI.
Mhm.
You can build that in so you can build custom dashboards. Data will go directly from where you would normally pull for reporting into customized dashboards that'll, of
Nice.
course, usually get delivered in Power BI versus in the LMS. But that'll give you more robust ways to visualize data and analyze data. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do there too. Integration of content. Skillsoft's probably the most common set of content out there, but I mean, you might want to bring in
Mhm.
things like O'Reilly Books.
Right, right.
So,
Amazing,
um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's just so much stuff out there that you can do with these things. SSO, which is that process of looking at who your
Yes.
user roles are, and determining. We talked yesterday about what was the first step to really getting people engaged, and we landed on the idea that literally SSO for every user is the fastest way to get somebody to actually be engaged. So these are important things because it all gets set in the back end in Microsoft Azure. Yeah. And I remember learning Azure in my last role. So, and having
That's
login to go and fixing things on Saturday because somebody couldn't SSO in from an external site.
See,
So,
this is what scares me about my new job, Toddy. This is what scares me. I'm like, "What? What?
I
Nobody
know.
asked me about this, huh?" No,
I
but it
never
is
in
something
a
to
million
ask.
years thought I was gonna be doing this stuff, but I did. The warning there too is, you get too many people in there tinkering with things, and I've got some interesting stories to tell about what happens when somebody changes the SSO in the middle of something and doesn't tell you. So,
Oh, I think
mm,
we had that actually happen, frankly, at my organization a few months back. And all of a sudden, all the logins weren't working. We
yes,
couldn't get into our site ourselves, and we were like, and my leader is responsible for the website, but was not the
yeah,
person who did it. It happened on another. To your
yes,
point, someone else who had access, who just I forget what they did, but it was a very minor change in the background, and we're all like, oh my! I think it was a good 6 hours. So it was a
yeah,
good number of hours before anyone noticed it. We're not just in our website all day, but then yeah,
right.
crazy.
Or you find yourself giving someone all the credentials for manual login and saying, okay, right now SSO is broken, but
Mm,
here's manual login. So just so many different
so
factors and
many
all
things.
stuff. It's like I can't think of anything that's really more complex in terms of like a system of record for a company. Because the LMS will touch almost everything that your company does in terms of process, in terms of compliance, in terms of audits. I mean, it's just crazy. And so, even though we talk about things like the LMS is going away, I can't see that happening in any
In its
time.
entirety. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, so since you said that, and I know this is a little off script, but in terms of LRS, and I remember having these conversations like
Yep.
7 to 7 years ago initially, and people were scoffing at me, and it was this, and I was in a corporate environment, so I understood, but I'm curious as to how far along that might have come and how that sort of reads into this because I think about the systems I know about right now. So for an
Yep.
example, which a lot of us deal with is SCORM, right? And in the system that I have, SCORM, you can only track SCORM as 0 or 100. That's it. It doesn't
Right.
go in, it doesn't pull anything out. Now I can go and do have access to all my data in the SCORM cloud, and I go back there and I do what I need to do in my SCORM cloud when I want to get detailed. But
Right.
in this instance, like I keep thinking, okay, I'm taking this on. This seems like a great case for an LRS where I could pull data in right to something, not eliminating the LMS. Obviously, it's where
Right.
everything's living,
Yeah.
except for the data.
Right, and if anybody doesn't know what the LRS is, it's the Learning
Mhm.
Record Store. And actually, you may be right. I think as things kind of evolve with AI, maybe in closed loop, large language models, like closed loop internal, we
Mhm.
might see more of like the typical LMS functions as far as learning fall to things like AI and more personalized systems. Because I mean, how awesome would it be to just be able to ask that internal closed loop AI a question and get an answer that follows
Be
your
amazing.
process, and have that record go somewhere where it shows that these are the things you're doing within your
Mhm.
learning record stores. Again, have their own integrations because they'll go to data warehouse.
Data
That comes
warehouse.
to us. Yeah,
You ever
the
picture data warehouse in your head, like as a place? I think of
yeah.
the. You ever
Oh
watched The
yeah.
Good Place, right? The white void for the
Yes.
Janet character. That's what I picture data warehouses.
I always picture it being somewhere cold.
I feel like it would be well, but they are never cold in her void. But
Yeah,
yeah, it
it's
makes
like
my
a
hand cold
fortress.
just thinking about it. Yes.
It's so funny. Yeah, it's funny because that was actually part of the project that we did for the company that I worked for in 2018, a DoD company, DoD facing company. So we got the LMS all set up. We basically created the passover to learning record store. We had everything go up to the data warehouse for the entire company, and it's like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, how many times can we pass this data around? But it was really fascinating. And again,
Sounds
like,
like it is not mainstreaming though at all yet, even though that we were
no,
talking about this a decade ago. So it is interesting, and maybe the people who are scoffing were not wrong
yep,
entirely, you know.
exactly. Yeah, it's and it again, it involves, really smart people to help figure out what the project
Yeah.
management looks like to implement these things.
There's never the
Basic,
time for that.
yeah, the charter agreement that we talked about a couple days ago, where people have made decisions ahead of time and talked to one another, really plays into this too, at least in terms of saying this is what we like our desired state to look like, and this is the representative who can speak to that. Those are important things too. The other thing, though, with respect to all of these things that happen is you're definitely going to be reporting up to IT groups that are going to be handling these larger scale data moves. Like,
Mhm.
because we're still sitting down here at the LMS level, that
And
we're,
for us, that's going to be a lot of consultants, frankly, because they're already in
yeah.
process for all of that. We're actually, it's a Salesforce meeting that I was telling you I'm walking into next because we're integrating with a new
Yep.
AMS and a Salesforce base for reporting. So it
Oh,
should be
wow.
fascinating. Yeah, it should be really
Yeah.
fascinating. But yeah, deep
Yeah.
end.
And there are people out there that customize Salesforce too. That's a
Yes,
whole other
and
thing.
that's who we're meeting with as well, like some a firm that does that. So it's crazy. If I wish I knew their name, I won't lie. It's my first meeting, so I'll
I
be
know.
excused.
Crazy stuff. The things that you don't know you can do with the software when you customize it. So,
It's very
um,
true.
I threw out a really quick kind of just a visual of what happens with when you have an API call. I spoke to this earlier. That you send the data, you map to the fields. Field mapping, by the way, is a really important thing to understand when you're working in this space. Because part of what happened with me when I would do the update to the custom field, which was the supervisor field,
Mhm.
is that I had previously worked with the learning management systems backend support team to ensure that I had proper data mapping to the fields. And they were phenomenal to work with because they provided everything up front, so that I could share it with the folks that were pulling the data for me and align it.
Beautiful.
But mapping to those fields, is certainly critical for those updates. And then once everything updates, like you'll get those error reports that will say, okay, so we just pulled this data in. This is where we see an error. And the error might have been that maybe a user just doesn't exist. So it's
Right.
not like a critical thing, but maybe they don't exist. Maybe they just, they've been gone for a month and, the things have not been synced up. So, these are the kinds of things that happen kind of on that like deep dive of what happens when you do these updates and the kinds of data flows that happen. And again, it's data. I mean, it's got a process behind it. So, um, let me skip ahead here too. Reporting.
Oh, the fun of reporting.
The
I
fun of
love
report.
reporting. I spend 4 to 8 hours every month on reporting. And by the way, folks, that's automated reporting. It's
Yes,
automated.
exactly. Exactly.
Um,
Not custom.
Not custom. Well, and you know what? We did get some custom modules, and it's interesting because they do completely different things. And I think I mentioned to you, and I may have said earlier in this broadcast, like when a field is missing.
Yep.
And for us, the company field being missing is a tremendous problem from a reporting perspective. And the
Right.
funny thing is, and here's something, Toddi, I'd love your thoughts on this. I certainly have a thought on what's causing this, but I'm just smart enough to be dangerous in this space. And it's I have this, I can get my company name, by the way, on one report back
Okay.
in the customized reporting section that they just introduced to us,
Okay.
but it appears on no other reports as an option to add. And my theory on this is they're working off, if not more than two databases, at a minimum two databases.
Yeah.
And that's because I'm like, this is positively absurd. I can see the field in this one report, and it's a
Yeah.
buried report that I might never have found, but I found it. And I'm like,
Right. Yeah, that it sounds that way just from
right?
I mean, because if it didn't exist in another database, it would just probably be a blank.
That's what I thought,
It
or it wouldn't exist at all. I mean, the field doesn't exist in
yeah,
another. So
yeah.
it's the strangest thing, and I'm like I said, just smart enough to be dangerous, and this doesn't jive for me.
And it's well, and so we talked yesterday about bringing in a really strong analyst, and
Yes.
If you can get somebody on your team that's an analyst, it will help you in these ways because, I've gone in and done custom reports for management based on
Mhm.
their requests and learned that, like I can put these together, but an analyst might be able to tell me where I could either add additional information to give
Mhm.
it better clarity or whether I
Yes.
might be duplicating something. And these are areas where I don't feel like I'm super strong. And yet a lot of these systems are actually pretty easy. They'll be as simple as creating reporting and custom reporting using drag and drop. You
Mhm.
know, you choose your criteria, you build it out, you want to, say how it's going to display, like
Yes.
what order things go in, you can do all this in the back end and most learning management systems to create a report. You can schedule them and it can become exactly like you said before, a scheduled report, or it could just be a one-off that somebody asked for, which, we touch on later as well. Um, One-offs can be a lot of work.
Yes, I get at least one off a month, I'll say, and that can suck up
Yeah,
2 to 4 hours again,
yeah,
because you still have to look at every single thing, even though it's only for one
absolutely.
client, one person, one
Yep,
member.
yep. And so I threw up here just kind of where the buckets are that
Mhm.
reporting falls into. Operational, which, is probably the most common report going to see against compliance measures. Does everybody have they all taken fall protection? Have they done ESD, electrostatic discharge, if they're working in operational spaces? The things that are compliance, it might be, something like the anti-harassment. It might be your, like active shooter training and things like that you really have to report on it from a
Exactly.
compliance perspective. Ethics. So those typically get into the operational bucket. Performance. That's a different thing. That's again like that example I used where you've got Salesforce connected and you're able to see the translation of the
That's
training.
the dream,
Somebody,
yeah,
yeah, those are cool. Those are really cool
yeah.
reports. You can see more of that in a performance type report. And then you get into things like engagement reports, which there are literally systems out there that will determine whether somebody's got more than one window open. I don't know if anybody remembers, oh gosh, there was a not Zoom,
GoToMeeting?
GoToMeeting. Yes, thank
I
you.
remember that. I do remember that feature.
And I always thought, how cool is that? But it would actually detect on the back end for each user whether or not they had more than one window open, and then use that as a measure of engagement. Whether somebody was
Mhm.
multitasking at the same time, like crazy stuff. Content interaction metrics, which can go deeper, especially if you're actually like implementing XAPI. You're looking for a very specific thing that somebody might be doing beyond yes, no, complete, incomplete. So those would be more in that
Yeah.
engagement report like arena. So, but and then custom reports, which are their own animal, and it's usually somebody's whim.
True,
Not,
and I love the custom reporting that they have introduced to us in the system, but it lacks what I need from a it's like their regular reporting and their custom reporting. If I could somehow put them together, I would
yep,
have what I needed.
yep,
And for some reason, they're not. There's no way to do that, and I find that interesting just from a
it
as a
is.
builder, right? When I'm building my e-learning or thing, I'm building it with structure and so that it all supports each other and works back. And I thought software was built that way. And I know a lot of software is built that way because I've seen the plumbing diagrams. Like,
Hmm,
but
hmm.
apparently not in this instance. And I think so many LMSs are different systems bolted together,
Right, right.
even
They are
still, right?
because they're acquisitions.
Yeah, and it's that's why where the challenge lies because of the consistency
Yep.
or inconsistency.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's and you're right, because custom reporting can be fascinating. You learn new
Yes,
things when you do this.
so
I threw
much.
this up here. The customizations that can happen with respect to reporting. I threw a couple things in here. Tagging, which I really made a strong practice in I'd say the last 5 years of ensuring that every piece of content was tagged, so that anybody who was looking for something could find it without knowing a title. So if you could say, give me a report on everything that this particular group has done around maybe fall protection, fall safety. If they took an old unit that maybe even had been expired, as long as it was tagged, it would still show up in their reports. So, like, there's things that you can do on the back end that can make your reporting a lot more robust. And in the case of, something that was expired or replaced, it may not have shown up, and somebody might have been like, "Hey, I'm overdue." They might actually still be overdue because the training is new and updated, right? But at least say you're in an investigation, never had that happen before. Is did they ever have something? Well, you can go
Right.
back as long as something is tagged, even if it's a retired unit, and still see that somebody has had that education in the way back, and that they've got at least a basis for understanding the safety procedures. So, um, yeah.
And it's funny when you talk about it with respect to safety and compliance, and I feel like a lot of us that have worked in medical or healthcare, right, manufacturing,
Right,
we do have older systems where these are the exact things that are coming up, right, or that have
right.
come up in the past. So exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. There are a lot of things you can do though. I mean, the custom data fields, which can give you better insight into your reporting. Say, I've got this group of people that are in marketing, they fall under this
Mhm.
manager, but everybody's under this supervisor. Um, and then you can even look at little finite details like, hey, does that supervisor have their training done? Like, it's just kind of that errant group out there
Yeah.
that where the supervisor is telling people that this something doesn't matter, which I've never encountered that
Oh
before
no,
either.
oh my gosh. Yeah, someday when we're having drinks, I have a story about calling a leader out on
Gosh,
something like that in a public forum. The
yes.
stupidity of me as a youth, but that
Oh,
is
and
definitely for alcohol.
I've created reports of all the supervisors who haven't finished their own training and have groups that haven't finished their
I
training
love
and
it. I love it.
surface those to people who are like, "Oh yeah, we don't care." I'm like, "Okay." Uh,
Hey, I've taken
so,
compliance training for
yeah,
COOs, not in
yeah,
my current company for the record, but
yeah,
it all happens. You see it all in L&D.
yeah. So much for leading from the top, huh? So,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't I
um,
could we could have a whole discussion
oh
on
yeah.
that alone.
Definitely. But it's fascinating to look at,
It
so,
is.
but yeah,
It
you
is,
can
and the data is fascinating, like,
yeah,
everything you're getting at, like, when you start looking at that and you start getting that granular, right? I mean, when you can
mhm,
cross-section training and development data with performance data and HRIS data on turnover,
yep,
you've got something there, and it's scary, and some people don't wanna look at it, but from a practitioner's perspective, from when I was back in HR for so many years,
yep.
like, that stuff fascinated me because there you will find correlation, right? And you'll
Oh,
be able
oh,
to sort of
absolutely.
think about cause, and it's so interesting.
And who might be the next leader or the next
Yes.
trainer, or because I know we had a situation too where we were looking for a train the trainer kind of thing, but we needed to get
Mhm.
those people through a train the trainer course, and we were looking for candidates, and so looking at the reporting gave me a pretty good insight into who had completed their own personal learning and had gone back and done refreshers in a timely manner, kind of like what their cadence was, how long did they leave things,
Yes.
and it helped us sort through and say, hey, these would be really great people to put in more of a training lead, because we can see from the back end the kinds of effort they put into this.
Mhm. Right, and that's what you need when you're standing in front of the room facilitating because there's
Right.
no as anyone out there who's done this knows, like, you're just gonna have to figure it out because 'cause you're still up standing up there even if you forget
Yep.
everything that you're supposed to say.
Well, there's something democratic about that too, right? Like, it's not
I love
just, hey,
it,
I'm gonna go pick my favorite person. It's like, I've got hard data that says that this person is actually performing in a way that we would like to see.
and is
So,
able to perform successfully in the role. I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah, and as much as we like to bash systems for saying, okay, they don't give us everything we need with respect to inclusivity and accessibility, I think that there's also a way that hard data can level set things too.
It's
So,
part of it. It's part of the picture. I mean, the
yeah,
biggest challenge I've seen in my entire career around diversity, equity, and inclusion is honestly that people want to look at just one thing. And when I say I'm going to
right,
call it
right,
leaders, right? Leaders
yeah,
want and they want exact data. There's nothing exact about it. There's not one place to
right,
go. You need to
Yeah,
look at a lot of different things, and you need to consider your context. So this is
sure.
just another data point. Like none of us would go in the room and say, here's why you make this decision. We'd say, here's another data point to help you make this decision.
Exactly. Yeah, because I mean, you don't know. I mean, the person who didn't finish something may have an extenuating circumstance.
Exactly, and they'll know that, right?
Yeah,
Those leaders looking at that might say, Lisa was out of the office, with a family thing,
sure.
right, for 4 months, and so let's do X. Let's give her an opportunity to do X and see what she does.
However, interestingly enough, most learning management systems will allow you to put somebody in a leave category, so that data is actually very
That's I mean,
available.
I shouldn't say new, that's new to me. I've never seen that,
Mhm.
but I think that's amazing, and I like that because it I like the idea of it suspending, so you're
Yeah,
not looking at big red X's, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. They're not getting hit because they haven't completed something. So, yeah, all
And
kinds of
nor
fun
is the
things.
company, right? Because you're constantly audited, and like we've talked about a lot of healthcare. Like we can be super
Yep,
specific. You need that at a moment's notice. This way, you can say, "Well, here's the pool of people on leave."
yeah, absolutely.
I love
Yeah,
that.
no, lots of interesting insights. So, but yeah, it's cool stuff.
Q, you're
Um,
carrying our chat here, folks. Got to interact with Q. This is hysterical. I'm trying not to like literally laugh out loud as I look at all the items.
I know, I know. I missed you. Just saying. I'm glad you're back, man, because we missed you.
Seriously.
And by the way, I have to say to people, if we get to live events and Q shows up, he's a whole lot of fun in person too. So
Wow. We are going to get to live events. We
uh,
are.
we're
We are.
we're working on it. We got so many different goals here, but all
True.
good. So I threw a couple examples up here. And then, these are just kind of things to think about with respect to reporting, integrations, API cases, and it just was a really quick, like, syncing HR data. This is
Mhm.
data that can be synced with, a simple API call. Advanced reporting. We can export the data, we can visualize it in different ways, and especially if we've got a more robust system that's been customized, we can visualize our data in many different ways. I can use it in multiple ways for multiple purposes. And then the simple things like automating notices. And I have been in places before where they added in additional tools to remind you about things that were overdue collectively. So if you had something in Workday, like a performance objective that you hadn't filled out or you haven't done your SMART goal, it would tell you, hey, you've got to do this, but it would also pull from the LMS and make
Oh,
room.
that's
Yeah, yeah,
fascinating. Like,
yeah.
that is
So
fascinating. I kind of feel like so many people I work with would love
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's cool.
Because we use like 20 Monday boards and,
Yeah,
all these different systems.
yeah, I know. Monday, Asana, Trello.
Yes. And all of those types of things in theory would integrate, right? Just with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
XPPI
exactly.
call.
And that's what this particular system was for. It did
Amazing.
have some hiccups, but we actually dug into the LMS and set things to trigger from there as well. So I just noticed Christy Kittle says she's in the middle of an LMS search and can do for one that can do some performance management. Uh, put it all in one place. Yep, I'm with you, man. It's tough to find that system that does everything. And that's where these customizations sometimes come in.
Did you say
I
Cornerstone earlier, Toddy? Did something
Cornerstone
performance?
actually has a performance management option. So it's one of the few that I knew of a couple years ago that did that. There may be additional systems that do that now. But again, like I mentioned, the integrations with other tools like Salesforce can give you more data with respect to performance in your sales group, but that doesn't tell you anything else. Like you would have to build out ways to analyze performance against, maybe the onboarding process for new engineers. How quickly are they up to
Mhm.
speed? But again, like there's just so many ways to measure this.
Oh, it
But
looks like she has found a few additional, by the way.
oh, excellent. Oh, and you know
I've
what,
never
Chris?
heard of these. These are interesting. I'm gonna look
Yeah.
them up.
Oh, I actually have heard of Illumi. I have not heard of the other, but PLMS means it's a PLM system as well, right? Is that for Acorn? Um,
Wow.
Nice. Again, that's that integration with a PLM. Somebody someday is going to help us figure out how to get everything together.
I haven't known success factors to do that, but I have not been in that space to look at success factors and look at that. So
Yeah, that's me too. I haven't worked in success factors in probably about 7 or 8 years, so, but yeah. There's a lot, between all the folks that are in our teams here, like, we could aggregate, like, probably a spreadsheet of some of the tools that are
yeah,
out there and the features that they have, and really probably become a really great resource for people to be able to do some early vetting of systems without having to go to the outside world, where we know that there's people.
right. I wonder what's out there. I feel like in past
Yeah,
TDLs,
yeah,
TLDCs, I want to even look back. I'm going to make a note
yeah,
because I would be fascinated to see it. I know, like when I was consulting, like straight up consulting for the 4 years, like there were systems I got to work in that I no
yep,
longer remember the names of. I'm sure they're back in my records somewhere, but they were different. And like one of them was amazing. One of the online systems I worked in, I thought was amazing for building content as an ID. It did a
yep.
lot of what Rise does, but frankly, it did it better. And it had,
Oh,
just a little, some more options. And it was interesting. I remember it was a software company I was working with at the
very
time. So it
cool.
was a fortune. But
Yeah.
like, I'd love to see what you all have been working with to learn more about what's out there.
Yeah, and I know I see people post questions on our channels about different tools and tool sets, but if we were able to get a little bit more experience and kind of aggregate some of that stuff, it might be really
Oh yeah,
useful
and
for
Christy
people.
said she just screened like 25. So Christy, we were going to be hitting you up for
Nice.
for some
Awesome.
info. I am super curious.
Well, and of course these things change really rapidly,
Yeah,
and then, one day something will have every stay, there's another system out there that's got more or less or different features,
crazy.
which is why part of the reason when you ask why I'm not consulting, I'm like, there's 800 and some LMSs out there. I don't know how you can wrap your brain around anything except kind of understanding what's underneath the hood. Um, and they're all very similar. And if they're not, if they're not giving what you need, I would like to escalate those
Mhm.
talks as well, because I have seen some that don't do what they're supposed to do, but they're basically the same. But if we could make a spreadsheet of all the features and the things that most systems can do and start to look at them, it might be really useful. I know things we can do in our spare time, right?
Right, exactly. But maybe Christy will share her Airtable with us, and we can
Yeah.
start there.
Awesome. Well, and Christy, I've been suggesting that maybe between all the wealth of knowledge that we have in this group, that maybe we can start to kind of put together like almost a playbook for literally these systems.
Right.
It might be something we could collectively do as a group. You never know, because there's just so much to it. It's wild. It blows me away sometimes. So sweet, awesome. So yeah, we've talked about this, what it'll achieve. So we're repeating what we had before on my slide. What will it achieve? Unified data, risk mitigation. There's something we really haven't talked about. Risk mitigation with respect to, and Lisa, you mentioned this a couple times, especially working in the medical spaces or FDA.
Mhm.
Um, Risk mitigation for failures in so many different ways, actually,
Yes.
especially compliance. Um, but yeah, I mean, better alignment with business executives. There's so many things that we get from doing this work, and how to do this work is still a mystery. I think simply because all of these systems are so like different. So um, I did put down an action plan, and I mentioned this before. Do some audit, and you can audit what you have, your integrations, the gaps that you see, the things that are being asked for on custom reports are usually a pretty good indicator of where your gaps are, the kinds of um, things that you're getting called into your help desk. If you look at your help desk records,
Mhm.
you're going to see where you may have some gaps. People let you know really quickly if there's something that's not reporting right for them. And maybe the data is erroneous. So, don't forget to look at like your help desk tickets. Those are always a good place to look for gaps. I think we lost Lisa for just a second here. She'll be back, I'm sure. Um, and then also it helps you identify the things that you can optimize with APIs, the types of custom reports and dashboards that you can create for stakeholders. You really think about that, I think, as you kind of move forward this process to audit your LMS. And it's funny, I hate the terminology of auditing in the system, But if you approach it, with an intent, so look for ways to optimize something. I think you can start to figure out how you can make life easier moving forward for you, so you're not doing quite so much custom reporting. These are definitely things we can think about. Um, Actually, Cupid in here, he said, oh, actually, I've got a whole list of stuff, by the way. There's a link in here, guys. I'm just going to point this to you, or point this out to you. Christy put it in now, and I believe it is all of her list of things and links that she has been using. This is phenomenal, by the way. I just can't even tell you. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I know that Luis will put things into some notes when he packages this up for everybody to have the recordings. So these are the kinds of things we'll grab. But the other part of it is to go ahead and, if you're in here today, you can grab that link and take a look. But again, I can't thank you enough for sending this kind of thing, because we really, the brain power in this group is phenomenal. We can leverage that. I saw a few hearts. We definitely are all smart people. I know that. Q saying Cornerstone's good. Getting metrics, and I would agree with you on that. I've worked with Cornerstone twice, probably for about 5 years total. But there's other systems out there that'll really give you good metrics as well. And there's smaller ones, bigger ones, systems that handle internals and handle externals and selling of classes really well. Some of the smaller ones I've worked with recently, I actually worked with Absorb, which had great service, which is another thing you guys want to think about, is how responsive is the service with the learning management system you're looking at if you don't already have it. If it's already your problem, it's your problem. Somebody else selected it, and now you have to figure out how to work with the success folks and the support people. But if you're out there looking, definitely look to the support records and determine who gives the best support, because some are better than others. Some are extremely responsive. Some are really good at pointing you to their back-end dev teams. And others are extremely well known for getting you into their ticketing queues and waiting weeks to get back to you. So, those are the kinds of things you want to look at, because if you're going to do any of this work in the customization space, you're going to need the help of the back end, members of the teams for your LMS group. You're going to get to know them pretty well. So, just kind of letting you know there. Let me scoot forward here. So all of this being said, additional considerations that I think are really important with respect to customizations and reporting integrations, and especially for serving your customer, your management, your leaders, is to consider adding a ticketing system. And there's a couple of reasons for this. And Lisa talked about getting at least one request a week for somebody wanting to do a custom report. That's great. Let's put it in a process. And the reason I say that is because maybe you're going to get 4 of those reports a week. How do you triage those? What is the priority? So if you've got a ticketing system out there where they can actually request very specific things like this, then they can click a box, say, I like a custom report, or maybe I need you to add something to the dashboard, and they say it's a low priority or a high priority, then you're tracking this. And that's really important. It's also important, just like any kind of a help system. And I know that we're now creating our own kind of almost internal help desk, is set an SLA on this. What's your turnaround time? Is it 2 days just to respond to them and say, hey, yes, I got this? Is the expectation that you're going to, create this report within a week? Is that reasonable? Can you do that? Can you close these tickets out? Can you show that you've completed them? Because again, these are your own personal metrics with respect to report mass. Have you had things that sit out there for weeks on end because you're having to consult with the back-end LMS team to get help on something? This is the way that you can track what's happening as you go through your system and start to optimize and create a better LMS. So just saying out there out loud, consider tracking. And then, because tracking is usually part of the ITIL process, it's also not a bad idea to do the RACI matrices against the things that are being done within the LMS with respect to customizations. And I'll give you a really quick story. I alluded to it earlier, but I had a situation happen where one of my managers had access to the SSO. And because one person was having problems getting into the system, this person went in and changed the SSO settings in the back end of Azure with an IT person and didn't tell me. Didn't know that they had actually done it until the next day when I was trying to figure out, and I was able to trace it through some of the historic records in the system and find out they had changed the back end SSO criteria, which it created everything, it caused everything to blow up over the weekend. You know, I had not just one person or two people that couldn't get in, I had hundreds. So, you know, you want to be able to define the tasks and the roles associated with the LMS so that you know who's doing what, and that at the very least, if you've got a race in place, they need to inform you. You know, you might be that informed person, you may be the decision maker. The other piece of it too is really look closely at who has access to getting into the reporting, because that's a really important thing. It's not a bad idea for managers to be able to pull their own basic reports. So, you know, if you can create a role that gives them that kind of access, that's great. And this is maybe a slight one-off on this topic, but you also want to be really mindful of who can remove content. Because I've had that happen before too, where I've had a one-off particular manager decided that a class that was part of a compliance learning path was no longer needed. So it took me digging into the back end reporting and going back to the LMS company to help me do more digging to find out, first off, who'd done it and what it affected and whose records it affected. So, you know, the LMS admin is probably one of the most important people you're ever going to deal with in this process because they know a lot. Hopefully you'll have more than one. Hopefully they'll be well trained and they have a great relationship with the learning management system backend, either customer success people or the programmers. I've worked in a company of 50,000 people that had one primary LMS support person, and I can't tell you what kind of a nightmare that was. So anyway, so I think this is kind of where we're at on this. We're just about at time. I'm hoping that this has been helpful for you guys, that you don't want to just use out of the box ever. And if you're using it straight out of the box and it's working for you, great. But I would say that you're probably going to get far more out of it if you take the time to do the audits and determine where you can customize. So anyway, I think this is where we are. We're at 5 minutes till, and I just want to tell everybody have a great holiday. I do also want to let you know that we are going to continue this series. So we're going to have some other speakers come in after the holiday to continue talking about the learning management system. I think we could be talking about this for the next 3 or 4 weeks, right, Luis?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's funny, like it might not be a huge audience for TLDC, right? That are going to want to jump in and talk about the exciting world of the LMS, but it's something that I think is necessary, you know. And
It's the biggest spend you're going to make out of your department. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 25,000 to, you know, $250,000 for these systems. You know, plus all the cost for implementation and the integrators that come in and charge you for other additional things. I mean, it's like a huge spend. So, you know, it's definitely one of the most important. So.
Yeah, and anything that we can do to get Kits all back around, then you know, that makes it all worth it.
Absolutely. I have missed you, man.
All right, everyone. Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great holiday if you're celebrating, and we really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. Toddi, thanks for, you know, running this whole thing. You basically were the all the energy behind this event, and so much appreciated. We're gonna just continue to do these, and yeah, and I want to chat with you after we close out the session too. Okay.
All right, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.